as we go. Welcome everyone for coming along tonight. This is our second webinar for Bay Conservation Alliance. We're very fortunate to have Anna Wench and Callum Armstrong here, I've got my notes, to be presenting conservation in the sub-Antarctic islands, so leaving New Zealand shores and, well, entirely New Zealand shores, but leaving the mainland of New Zealand and heading down south tonight, which will be really exciting. Just a couple of etiquette things with regard to a webinar. So please, can you leave your microphones muted for the time being? Callum and Anna have advised that this will be about 45 minutes presentation, and then we're just going to have a session afterwards for questions. So as you're listening, if you just want to jot down some questions, and then we can have a question and answer session at the end. This session is being recorded, so you can tell your friends and they can watch it via the Bay Conservation Alliance website after the event. I think that's it. Anything else that I need to mention, Callum?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you all for coming. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, and I will introduce these people because they're very, very good people. So Anna, I met through Western Bay Wildlife Trust. She's one of the keen volunteers there, and she was doing penguin monitoring and also shorebird monitoring, and runs that shorebird team. She was also in the very first intake of our Bay Conservation Cadets. So it's lovely to see her in her role now, which is principally working for the National Kiwi Hatchery in Rotorua. And she describes herself as a self-introduced to New Zealand. But we're very, very privileged and welcome her here, obviously. Callum is a social entrepreneur and marketing coach, and he brings together business and conservation using business as a vehicle for change. He is also the managing director of Paste and Publish and the charity Conservation Amplified, which he may tell you about a little bit like that later. He's also a regular conservation volunteer for many conservation projects in the Bay of Plenty. So I am going to hand it across to you guys and let you take it from there if you're happy with that.
Thank you for the endearing introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Righty-ho. Does the screen sharing work all right?
Yep, all good.
Sorry, technical stuff. Close your eyes. There we go. Okay. I'm just wondering if we can minimize that so they can see the whole screen.
Here we go.
Can you still see that?
I can. No, all good. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Up for you.
All right. Kia ora. Yeah, thank you for having us, Emma and Bay Conservation Alliance. And I'm quite excited, to share with you the predator-free stories of New Zealand's sub-Antarctic islands. Callum and I were both fortunate enough to go on a trip down there over Christmas last year. And we're just looking forward to sharing a bit more of, the information with you guys.
So in the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be going through a number of things. We'll start with the general information about the subs. We'll then take a look at our expedition and the order in which we're going to be going through these islands. Then we'll look at the snares, Campbell Island, Auckland Island, a bunch of interesting stuff about all of them, what the future conservation stakes are, including a really interesting project, which Anna will be telling you all about. And then we can open up for Q&A.
Awesome. So let's start off with general information. So New Zealand has 5 sub-Antarctic islands, and they're all national nature reserves, and they hold the UNESCO heritage status. So on the map, you can see where they're all situated. So a lot of people asked us, said, oh yeah, you're going to Antarctica. But there's actually quite a lot of water between those islands and Antarctica. But anyway, if you want to go there, you can only visit with accredited companies, which involves a series of dock permits, etc. And within these 5 subs, there are only 3 specific landing sites. Otherwise, only Zodiac cruising is allowed following a no landing policy. There's also a minimum impact code in place. And as you might have already seen on the map, different islands have different predator-free statuses. And yeah, we'll focus on that during our webinar.
Right. So we got on the boat, I think it was about the 19th of December. We landed on the boat in Bluff, and then we spent about a day and a half going down to Campbell Island, the southernmost of New Zealand's subantarctic islands, about 700 kilometers south of mainland. From there, we spent a day walking around there, looking at the amazing wildlife. Then we went up to the Auckland Islands group for 2 days. We then moved on to the Snares, which was a bit closer to home. Zodiac's around there, and then we came home via Old Island, Stewart Island, and then back. So in this presentation, we're going to take a look at it based on their predator-free status, starting with the Snares, which have never really had predator impacts, and then moving on to Campbell Island and then the Auckland Islands.
All right, so a little bit about the Snares Islands, or Tinihike. So they are roughly around 100 kilometers southwest of Stewart Island. They're the closest subantarctic islands to the mainland, and they're around 340 hectares. You can see the island group just there on the map, Northeast Island being the biggest of the groups. And like Callum already said, there've never been any mammalian pest introductions throughout its history, and that results in it having more nesting seabirds than the British Isles, which is pretty mind-blowing and exceptional, really. It's really exciting.
So human history-wise, Māori knew of the island group. It can be seen from Rakiura, Stewart Island, on a good day. It's thought that Māori may have voyaged to Tinihike for titi, or the sort of shereweta or mutton bird harvesting, but there's no solid evidence to show that. Europeans discovered the group of islands in late 1791 in November, and they called it the Snares because it was seen as a shipping hazard. You'll see when we get onto the photos, they are quite rugged, to say the least. They tried sealing when they dropped a bunch of people off there, but they decided it was too hard, so it never really happened, thankfully for us and for the wildlife, of course, more importantly. And then it became a nature reserve in 1974.
All right, so yes, that's part of the coastline of on the picture of the Snares, and as you can see, it's rather steep, not very comfy looking for any human settlements. And yeah, so nowadays it always has been predominantly covered in Olearia leale forests. So roughly 80% is that species alone. It's home to 3 herb species. It's the breeding site of roughly 2 million sooty shearwaters, making them the most common breeding bird on that island, closely followed by the common diving petrel, but there's also several prime species and 4 albatross species nesting. There's 3 endemic bird species present, but for me most excitingly, it also has the endemic Snares crested penguin on it with more than 100 breeding colonies. And Jen, hi Jen again, one of our guides who is here, she actually ended up on a Zodiac with Callum and I, and she tricked me because I said, oh Jen, you better show us those penguins, and I had no idea how plentiful they were, to be quite honest with you guys. And Jen was like, oh, you might see them, and that's pretty much most that we saw, and we had a really good time chanting, show us the penguins, for a little while.
So when Anna says you might see them, she meant like, thousands of them. You'll see in this image here, there's a slope, a big, in the sort of just to the left of the image, it goes white near the bottom, and that is called Penguin Slope. You'll see that in a moment. Visitors can't land on the Snares, but you can Zodiac cruise. The reason for having no landing is that it's just so untouched. Not even mice are there. So really, really good to know. But in that slope, the reason why there's no forest here is because the penguins are so their guano is so nutrient rich that it actually kills the forest. So they have to constantly move around the island to avoid destroying their habitat, which is pretty amazing, the amount of nutrients that they bring up onto land.
All right, and just a few pictures, sort of famous sneeze-crested penguin. We were also really fortunate to see a leopard seal, and it's a juvenile. They are vagrants to the region, and then just a real good example of that Olearia leale forest as well.
And here we go.
And
This is penguins.
this is Penguin Slope. So yeah, like Callum already said, they're kind of the little mini gardeners of the island. They do need the forest to breed, to nest. They love nesting under the tree cover, but because of that guano overload, yeah, they're constantly forced to move around because they slowly but surely kill their own habitat off.
Oopsies. Try that again. You might have to watch it again. There we go. So yeah, like I said, historically predator free and a continuous safe haven for its species. The biosecurity measures here are pretty serious, and it's awesome to see that is the case. And it's our responsibility to keep it this way. These wild places are truly magnificent, and this is just an example of what it's like if we don't have a human impact. Amazing.
All right, let's move to Campbell Island. Campbell Island is the southernmost New Zealand of the New Zealand subs. It's roughly around 700 kilometers south of Bluff, and it's 11,300 hectares, famously known as the home of the albatross. And it has rainfalls on average on 325 days. So you really do feel that you're getting closer to Antarctica here, and yeah, mean annual temperature is 6 degrees. So it was like almost a true Christmas for me, being born in the Northern Hemisphere, nice and cold.
Yep, no barbecue or pahudakawa tree there. So human history, really fascinating. It was discovered in January 1810 by Captain Hasselberg when they came looking for seals. It was actually named Campbell Island because that was sort of the name of the company he was representing. Sealing started shortly thereafter, and it was quite a sad story. They wiped all the seals out, then they went whaling until it was no longer economical. The first scientific expedition started in 1840, and Norwegian rats were already plentiful by then. However, farming started when the government let out land leases in 1895, and there were quite a few failed attempts at farming. They brought down thousands of sheep, a few hundred cattle. Eventually, it was abandoned in 1931 for a number of reasons. It was a bit too expensive to get the boats there to pick up the stock and bring supplies, and it just didn't make sense. They tried bringing Shetland farmers there because they were meant to be tough in these conditions, but it wasn't a good economic proposition, but it did leave a mark. Then the World War II coast watchers came to protect the country, and in that time was when a lot of our famous naturalists and scientists, such as Charles Fleming, came out of that. They were there. They did a lot of the research that made our scientific body of evidence around Campbell Island. Met Service came in the late 1940s for the weather balloons, and they were there until about the early 1990s. And it became a reserve in 1994, and that's when all the fun stuff started happening with the predator eradications, which you'll find out about in a moment.
Right, but first of all, let's learn a little bit about biodiversity. So Campbell Island are predominantly covered in Dracophyllum scrub. There's only one tree there, which is it often gets referred to as the loneliest tree in the world, which was actually planted there by humans. Other than that, there's 9 megaherb species, 6 albatross species bred on the island, and there's also 3 endemic land bird species. One is the Campbell Island snipe, the Campbell Island shag, and the teal. The teal actually has a real cool story, but I'll talk to that a little bit later. And the surrounding waters are nowadays home again to the southern right whale. And after all of the sealing occurred, nowadays we can see elephant seals, leopard seals, and the New Zealand sea lion again. So they made a really cool return, and we'll soon learn why.
Yeah, we anchored in Perseverance Harbour. That was the big harbour-shaped thing on the map that you saw in the first part of Campbell Island presentation. And there were a few options. We decided to do the longest option, and that was to do a 10K day walk to Northwest Bay. So we had to walk all around different parts of the island and saw lots of different habitats. The photo behind you here is up a big steep cliff, and it was quite crazy at this point to see there were sea lions sitting there and actually barking at us at this point. And skewer, the garbage disposers of the Antarctic, I guess you could call them.
Vacuum cleaners.
Vacuum cleaners is probably a nicer word to use up there. So yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, so just another close-up here of the megaherb species. They are truly spectacular. They're just, you can't compare it to anything that you may see on the New Zealand mainland. The most famous examples are probably the Ross lily and the Campbell Island carrot. And they really making a comeback in the later years. And as soon as you go onto those higher slopes, they're everywhere between the tussocks. It's absolutely spectacular. And then we, of course, have also the animals, being the southern royal albatross, then the Campbell Island teal at the bottom, and the sea lions, and you get the odd juvenile elephant seals quite often in Northwest Bay, just, hanging about. But the sea lions, they could and can be anywhere and everywhere across the island. And we actually, like Callum said, we saw some on the top of that cliff amongst those beautiful megaherbs, and they just suddenly disappear because you wake them up hiking past, and look at you, funnily.
Speaking of sea lions, oh no, these aren't sea lions, they're albatross. Scratch that.
So we were lucky enough to see quite a few southern royals, and we saw that one pair interacting, which was just an amazing sight.
Just before moving on to the next slide, if any of you have a $5 note in your pocket or in your wallet that's near you right now, I'd highly encourage you to open it up and see if you can see any of those megaherbs. Because the $5 note is New Zealand's currency of the subantarctics. It has megaherbs, it has some really cool stuff on there.
Hoi ho.
Hoi ho, that too. That's what I was looking for. So anyway, predator-free status and future stakes. As a side note, we are actually making a mini documentary on the rat eradication of Campbell Island at the moment. It turns out that it takes a bit more work than we thought it was for making a documentary. So 6 months later, and we're still working on it, but that is coming out. So keep an eye out for Conservation Amplified, and it'll be coming out hopefully in the next few months. Anyway, back to the predator-free status. Thousands of sheep, hundreds of cattle were removed between 1970 and 1992, cleaning up after the farming attempts that finished in the 30s. The conversations about can we make this predator-free started in the early 1990s. This was off the back of some early wins. Breaksea Island, I think that's about 200 hectares. Kapiti Island, about 10 times bigger. And then the next question was, well, can we go from 2,000 hectares roughly to 11,300 hectares? There were naysayers, but luckily it went ahead. Between 1999 and 2003, 100,000 plus rats were removed. This started off in 1999 when they went down for an initial trip and they scoped out the land. They did the planning and the testing. That they brought non-toxic bait with a rotamine dye in it, which made the rats turn blue when they ate it, or purple. They then tracked about 1,000 rats, and they had a look, and they noticed that every single rat was blue, 100% strike rate. So that, among many other details, confirmed that maybe their methodology can work. They then went back and planned, came back in 2001. Helicopters, cooks, chefs, pilots, the whole 9 yards. They had to bring down, I think it was about 700 tons of poison on a freighter, and they didn't have any storage area large enough, so they had to just keep these purpose-built pallets out in the wild for that. Yeah, pretty crazy operation. Allowed 3 months for it, but it only took 6 weeks in the end. Actually, the baiting only takes 5 days, but the weather is so rough that they had to allow 3 months. Every day they would pore over the maps afterwards. They would look at where did we miss and go back over it and have a 50% overlap. I'm just going to say I learned all of this from a lovely man named Lindsay Wilson, who told us all about it, who was in the eradication back in the early 2000s, and he's one of the main features of our documentary. Little side plug there. Anyway, they came back 2 years later. The reason why they came back 2 years later was that if there was just one breeding pair left of rats, they would breed back to a point where they'd be obvious. So they did that. And just one other note, obviously it worked, there was success, but one other note is that they did this eradication in the middle of winter, because that's when there were less penguins, less albatross, less breeding animals, and also less food available. So putting poison out would mean that it's a lot more appealing than when there's a lot of stuff going on in the summer. So the methodology that was pioneered through this program is now the global standard for island eradications around the world. It was scaled up to South Georgia Island, the islands in Hawaii. It's become the de facto process, which is pretty amazing that this was invented in New Zealand. Pipit and snipe returned quickly. They were gone for decades beforehand. The megaherb fields are absolutely thriving. The endemic teal, Campbell Island teal, was successfully reintroduced in 2004. Yeah, albatross, sea lions are doing well, but they are under pressure from overfishing, climate, and other challenges. And yeah, so basically we have to have very strict biosecurity measures to make sure that, and limit access to make sure that humans don't make problems.
I'm just gonna go back because I want to just quickly tell the story of the teal that I said yeah, I would touch on. So the Campbell Island teal, they actually found some of them, and rather than hoping for the best, they were brought into captivity, and they were pretty much doing a breed for release program. And once Campbell was predator free, they've reintroduced those teals back on the island, which is an amazing effort, and just proves that we can save those endemic species if we really put our minds to it. And also, I just want to reiterate about the strict biosecurity as well. And I'm really annoyed at myself that I didn't take photos, because it's very different to just going onto Tiritiri Matangi or something like that in the Gulf. They do really call the entire ship into a room, deck by deck, and you have to go for everything. So we were in the big lounge of the boat. You just yes, saw a picture of it before, and there were several stations, and you had to report to one of the guides, and you had to go and show them every single item you wanted to either take or wear on the island. There were vacuum cleaners to clean your backpacks, your pockets, your pant pockets, all of that jazz. And then there were also the famous mud rooms. So before we actually went into the Zodiacs, and even if we were just Zodiac cruising, not even landing on one of those islands, you had to wear their footwear that you had to clean before. And yeah, the provider and the company we went with, Heritage Expeditions, and their guides and they really took that seriously, which was amazing to see from a conservation point of view. So yeah, that's what that all means when you read, biosecurity measures.
Brings back a memory of Jen, who's on this call, picking little twigs out of my zippers about 6 months ago as of today. So thanks for that. Anyway, on to Auckland Islands.
So the Auckland Islands is the last island that we're going to talk about. And as you can see on the map, so it's actually a group of islands, and there's a few predator-free areas there. For example, Inderby Island and Adams Island at the bottom, as well as Disappointment Island. But the main Auckland Island is looking dull and grey, and there's a reason for that. But anyway, it's roughly 465 kilometers south of Bluff, and it's the fifth biggest offshore island of New Zealand, making it the biggest sub at 56,816 hectares. It's also the most biodiversity-rich island group, and it's of great spiritual and cultural significance to Kaitahu, which is the South Island iwi.
Human-wise, this is the southernmost extent of Polynesian Pacific voyaging, with 13th century archaeological deposits found. That's pretty crazy to think that coming from up in Polynesia all the way down to the subantarctics. First European visitor in 1806 was Captain Abraham Bristow, and sealing started the next year. It continued for most of the 19th century up till 1894. They tried farming a few times, but it didn't really work, similar to Campbell Island, beginning in 1873, ending in 1900. The islands were absolutely fatal for shipping. There were 9 wrecks recorded. There was actually one point in the history of Campbell Island where Auckland Islands, where they had emergency food stores for people that were shipwrecked and castaway depots as they're called, but they had government steamer ships coming down twice a year to search the islands for people that might have crashed their boat and been waiting to be picked up. So that's pretty crazy. Second World War, it had lookout huts after a German ship was found using Canley Harbour, and they became a nature reserve in 1924. Yeah. So biodiversity.
Yeah, so as I already mentioned before, the Auckland Islands, it's pretty exciting because it's the most biodiversity rich of the subs, and it actually has 3 distinct vegetation zones, starting with coastal herb turf, then leading into tussock and herb fields, but it actually has proper southern rata forest. Within the tussock and the herb fields, you can find 10 mega herb species, and quite often you will spot breeding seabirds in there, and most of the world's Gibson wandering albatross and white-capped mollymawks nest here, so it's quite significant. It's also the stronghold for hoiho, so the yellow-eyed penguin. They're an extremely shy and elusive penguin, and don't like being disturbed. And Auckland Island, especially Inderby Island, is their secret kind of hidey place where they're still thriving. And it also has 4 endemic land birds and several other forest birds. They even have, I think it's up to 4 to 6 pairs of New Zealand falcon down there. So extremely rich and diverse. And it's also the primary breeding location for the New Zealand sea lion, and that's actually the rarest sea lion species in the world.
Yeah, we went there for 2 days. The first day was cruising along the shoreline of Adams Island, looking at that beautiful rata forest, seeing the hoiho and some other birds. I think I had a bit of a cry here because when I saw all the birds taking off, and there were hundreds of thousands, probably 30 to 100,000, I reckon, just from my eye and taking off, it was pretty awe-inspiring, I've got to say. In the afternoon, we thought we had maybe escaped the famous bad weather of the subantarctic islands, because by this point in Christmas Eve, it had only been good weather for us. And then the weather packed in, and we realized that, yeah, maybe
There's some truth to
there
it.
was some truth to it. So we went back to the boat. The following day, we got a really good treat for Christmas Day, which was to go to Enderby Island. That is the smaller of the predator-free Auckland Islands. We saw a lot of cool stuff there, which we'll get to you in a moment.
Yeah, so there's a really nice picture of the southern rata forest that is covering a lot of the island, and then again the famous mega herbs, which you can just see again a few close-ups there, and then of course the hui-hau. I must admit, I was actually gonna count how many we see just on Enderby Island, because we did a big circuit around some of the island, and I stopped counting after we saw probably roughly 10 of them, and we would have seen probably double that at least. So super exciting. And then the Auckland Island banded dotterel, which is a subspecies of the banded dotterel, and then the endemic Auckland Island shag on the left, and then at the bottom the endemic Auckland Island teal, and of course the New Zealand sea lion. And we've got cool little video here for you guys of Sandy Bay, which is the breeding colony of Enderby Island. And if you look closely, you can actually see the boat at the back later on, and also Zodiac crossing over.
So just a bit of context before we press play. The darker colored ones are the males. The lighter colored ones are the females. You'll notice that the females do all the raising of the babies. They look after them, they protect them, and there's the really large sea lions are the beach masters. These are like the alpha males, and all the smaller ones are like teenagers that are trying to show their place. But when they try getting in there, they pretty soon find out who's boss. So let's take a look.
Here we go.
There we go.
So yeah, I really love about the video how you can see those famous harems just circling around those big beach masters.
Should we play it again?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So there's quite a lot going on. There's quite a lot to take in. It's yeah. Here's the ship.
All the way back there that's actually the landing site where we landed with the Zodiacs.
It's on the right-hand side. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But some of those male sea lions, when they're at a juvenile stage, they're actually not big enough yet to be on the beach and competing for the females. So those are the ones that you're most likely to see just hanging around anywhere, really, even if that's up near the cliffs on the island, just chilling around. And they can really give you a fright if you're just, going about your hike and suddenly this head pops up next to you and starts barking at you. And
so it's a bit like humans, really. Sorry.
Story.
Next page. Sorry, technical difficulties. Why is that not moving on? Anyway.
Here we go. Yeah, all right. So as you already know, Enderby, Adam, and Disappointment Island hold pest-free status. However, the main Auckland Island, the big grey dull landmass that you saw on the map, still has introduced mammalian species. It's the only subantarctic island which isn't predator pest-free. They did some great mahi as far as the predator or pest-free status goes. So they removed goats from Auckland Island successfully. They also removed cattle and rabbits from Enderby Island between 1991 and 93. But yeah, there's still mice, feral cats, and feral pigs on that big main island. So what does that mean? So I know that we all know that introduced species can and often are a huge problem. In this case, so 44 bird species, or of 44 bird species that breed on the island group, only 12 species still persist on that main Auckland Island. Mice are destroying the invertebrate community. They're competing for food. They even pose a risk to nesting seabirds. So we know that on other islands, mice sometimes eat little seabird chicks alive. We don't have proof yet, as in trail camera footage, that it's happening there, but the suspicion, we do have that suspicion. And the pigs are obviously devastating for the floral community, restricting plant regen, and also seabird survival and recruitment, right? They are omnivores, and they go for anything if they're hungry. And feral cats caused local extinction events already, which is the Auckland Island Rail, and they're causing just further decline. So I guess the big question is, can we stop local extinction and mimic what happened on Campbell Island?
So it is smaller than South Georgia. I just want to put that out there. Anyway, if we keep up the biosecurity efforts, we can help to keep our other subs pest free. But what about Auckland Island? There was a project put forward before COVID, the Mulka project, where the plan was to eradicate pigs, cats, and mice from Auckland Island. And Anna's going to go through the steps to do that in a moment, but it's important to remember that there was a plan in place. It was proven and tested. There was funding available, and then lockdown happened and that got thrown out. The funding was lost, but the plan's still there. If we can find the money to do it, we can make it happen. However, it does cost $80 million. So if any of you in the audience have a spare $80 million lying around and you're keen, just maybe can you just flip me an email and we'll have a chat.
Point you in the right direction.
Yeah, so you can save us. Look at all these pretty animals. And obviously the ecosystem's there. What happens to
So the bottom line is, yes, we can save those species and end local extinctions and the habitat loss. So the plan that they put in place, it's pretty much an 8-year eradication program. So as you probably can gather, those subantarctic islands are very hard to get to. They're super isolated. So step 1 would be to actually go down there and build the infrastructure to facilitate the plan in the first place. And then once that's all done, they would start with the feral pig eradication. So the reason for that is that they would otherwise interfere with eradicating of the mice, and they plan to use helicopters, so not shooting out of helicopters, traps, and then also another hunting team on the ground using dogs. And like I already hinted at, once the pigs are controlled, then we head on to the mice. So the only proven way to eradicate mice is pretty much a poison trap. In this case, 2 helicopters pretty much sowing toxins across the island, and we're going to have to do that twice because mice have a very teeny tiny home range. I think the textbooks say it's around 25 by 25 meters, but we now know that it can be significantly smaller than that as well, depending on the site. After that, the final puzzle to the piece would be eradicating the feral cats. So they actually designed a sausage bait that apparently is specifically appealing to cats that they would use, and then they would supplement that with ground hunting using conservation dogs and both at day and nighttime in particular, and then do extensive trail monitoring trapping to see if they can still pick up any remaining cats once they're pretty certain that they might have them all. And last but not least, they're gonna remove the infrastructure once the eradication is successful, and they're only gonna leave behind a research hub to then study, the positive effects of the eradication if it were, to go ahead.
So it's a pretty ambitious plan, but it's doable. And imagine that. Imagine if we made Auckland Island predator free.
So if we were to achieve that, keep in mind it is the biggest subantarctic island, and it's the 5th biggest offshore island. So just by achieving that eradication, we would double the landmass that's predator free in the subantarctic islands alone. So we would create a safe haven twice as big as we have now, which is amazingly significant if you consider how much endemism is down there.
So yeah, pretty cool. That's the end of our presentation. But before we take questions and answers, we'd like to say thanks to a few people. The first and foremost is Heritage Expeditions. This is the tour company that we went with. You can see their boat out of this cave here. They offer a true young explorer scholarship program where they make available a small number of berths on these trips to young people at a heavily discounted rate so that we can afford to go and we can see what happens. It's truly amazing that they do this, and yeah, really hats off to them. That's so awesome. In fact, the change to our charity, the Reforestation Fund, I'm going to mention in a moment, that we came up with that on
the boat.
That was where it inspired us, and it's actually making major differences in my life in particular, but our future. Thanks to Bay Conservation Alliance for hosting us and having us. Thanks to all of you for being here. I can't see you right now because the screen's sharing, but I'm sure we will in a moment. And then lastly, I just want to make a note about the Reforestation Fund. This is a charity that Anna and I set up in, I think it was about early 2020.
Yes,
we only really
like
started talking about it late last year. And originally we were focusing on raising funding for conservation, but we realized that outside of these conservation circles, most people don't really understand the realities of conservation. And if you don't know what's going on in nature and you don't know what people are doing to help nature, it's really hard to allow the money to follow. So we realized this on the boat and following that, and so we decided to rebrand and refocus our charity. We're naming it, this change is actually happening in the next few weeks, so watch this space, but we're naming it Conservation Amplified. And so the whole idea is that we take the stories of people that are doing good for nature and we share those stories so that they can get more audience and more resources to do what they need, and hopefully we can make an impact. If we can change the culture of people towards conservation, we can protect nature, but without that foundation, it's not really possible, is it?
No.
So yeah, we've got a podcast coming out. We've got some really awesome guests and speakers. We're making a documentary on the pest eradication of Campbell Island, and there's some other really exciting things that haven't been announced yet. If you'd like to follow on, you can check us out on social media. It's the Reforestation Fund at the moment. You can go to thereforestationfund.com, and in a few weeks that will be conservationamplified.org. So that's that. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening in, and I hope you enjoyed our presentation, our webinar, and I even more hope that you get the chance to go to those subantarctic islands at some stage, because they are truly life-changing. Seeing that, it's really, you're actually in that documentary, yeah, because there's so much going on. So yeah, thank you.
Thank
you so much, guys. It's really inspirational. Love seeing all those pictures and getting some feeling about what's going on in the background as well. We just open it to the crowd. So Huya or David have a question? If you can just unmute your microphone there. David?
Yeah. Hi. Hey, that was great. Anna, Callum, really interesting, and quite quite inspiring, really. I'd like to get down there at some stage. I know Barry went down there, I think, Emma, didn't he? Yeah, on one of those trips. Hey, what would it cost to do that project in the Auckland Islands?
Yeah, thank you, David, for asking. So it's $18 million.
80.
80. So it's, I guess, reasonably significant, but I think if you think about what we could have for that money long term, that would definitely pay off.
What does a sports stadium cost? A few $100 million. So it's like a third of. We could just have the first 30 meters of the rugby pitch, and that's like Auckland Island.
And is that a recent estimate, like of updated costs?
I think it's fairly recent.
Good question.
From what I know, it is a good question. It might be a little bit more now with the prices going up, but that's around what they reckon it would cost. Yeah, to do that. And like I said, it'll be over 8 years, so quite a significant time frame.
Where are you seeking funding? I mean, where is the funding being sought?
This webinar. I'm just joking.
Yeah, that's the problem, David.
Government.
It's
this government.
It's a joint effort by DOC and by Kaitahu, but no one's really, put their hand up to put in a good chunk of funding so others would follow. It's kind of lingering on the DOC website at the moment. That's one of their plans that they would like to do.
So do you know what did happen to the funding?
COVID happened, so the funding got redistributed to respond to the lockdowns. So that's the reason why it didn't go ahead, because we suddenly faced, I guess we all know, what happened there, and we just needed to sustain that.
Yeah, and I guess there's still, those impacts happening on other islands as well. Islands up north of New Zealand don't have their regular trips happening as well. So it's probably, having a very significant impact on islands that even did have a structured management to them, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's important to just keep on pushing and keep on talking about it, because we had that, Emma and us, we had that conversation yesterday when we prepped for this webinar, how we seem to live in our conservation bubble, and that is an amazing bubble, but we need to start bringing the messaging outside of that, because at this stage we need some big names to put their names towards achieving that pest-free status, I think.
Yeah, I think it comes back to having a understanding and a connection, and obviously an awareness of that these islands even exist. A lot of people that I told I was going to the subs for, they said, "Oh, you're going to Antarctica," and not realizing that there was actually this group of islands in between. And I think for more people than we might estimate aren't aware that they're there. And if you don't know that they're there, it's really hard to find people that are going to care. It'd be great if there was funding from maybe a wealthy individual or something like that. But again, if you don't know about it, if you don't have a connection to it, you don't care, it's really hard to stump up $80 million or, a portion of that.
It would be interesting to have a better understanding of, given predator-free New Zealand and predator-free 2050, how much that's increased people's awareness in general. And whether that would pique their interest for something like the Antarctic, and where their preferences would lay there, therefore.
Yeah, definitely.
And sorry, David, go ahead.
So just going back to Predator-free 2050, I think even $80 million for them is a pretty major ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
We really need somebody like Melinda Gates or somebody like that. I don't think she makes a donation less than $100 million a US.
Yeah,
that would be amazing. What I love about the Auckland Island example is that it's realistic, and I guess the surrounding islands, it's actually a bit of a miracle that they are still predator free. And we asked on the boat, how come that it's so close to each other and they haven't been any invasions? And they think, and Jen, please correct me if I'm wrong, they think it's got to do with the strong currents and the wild weather in between that so far it hasn't happened yet. But I mean, the risk is still there, right, on a daily basis.
Tell me, has there been any local extinctions?
Yes, there used to be an endemic rail species, the Auckland Island rail, and that went extinct, sadly. And then really, that main island, there's bugger all species. Those fragile species are holding on Adams and Enderby Island. Yeah, and I'd say they would quickly jump back onto the main island if it were a safe space, because that's what happened on Campbell Island.
Yeah.
And so with Enderby, I think you said there was rabbits and goats eradicated from Enderby, is that right?
Rabbits and cattle.
And cattle. Okay, so they've still got mice.
No, so Enderby Island is completely predator free.
Okay, so they would have had mice there?
Sure.
I don't think so, Emma. I don't think so.
And what about rats on Auckland Island?
No, they never made it there.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, which is again is pretty significant, isn't it?
With all the ships crashing, you'd think that you get shipwrecks, but obviously not.
Yeah. And just I had a question, possibly to you, Callum. You said about them putting stores for shipwrecks on Auckland Island. Do you know when they started there?
Oh, I don't have a date for you. Sorry, I can put a guess out there.
Like mid 1850s.
I would imagine around then. We're just looking over the slides, but I think it was about then, because it would have been when the major shipwrecks were happening. Sorry, I don't have a clear answer on that.
No, that's okay. I thought you might know. I've just been reading a book about a shipwreck, the General Grant down on Auckland Island, and it beautifully paints the picture of these shipwrecked people, and they're looking for those stores. So I was just wondering how that married up.
Yeah, it would have been pretty scary existence.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, in the book, it's very much they're just living off mussels and then learning how to kill club seals to death, and it's pretty grim.
Yeah, it would have been pretty rough, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yes, Genevieve.
Hello, sorry, I don't know. Oh, how do I lower my hand again? There we go. How important was it to you guys seeing these places in real life rather than kind of remotely? Because I know for my personal experience, it was what really fired up the passion in me was seeing these places with my own eyes versus, that kind of watching a BBC nature documentary kind of feel. So I'd like to know, your thoughts on that.
Yeah, good question. I have a thing when I get bored at my desk, and it's called Living Vicariously Through Google Maps. And I've done it since I was maybe 18 years old, and probably earlier, 15 years old. And I used to always somehow get to Auckland Island, Campbell Island, and start zooming in and seeing the photos that people have posted. I think some were even from Heritage. And so probably for the last 10 to 15 years, I've been dreaming of this and imagining it, and getting snippets of info here and there, and to then actually see it in person, it was pretty amazing. But I think it's also any experience is also about the people you're around, and having people that know their stuff, that are scientists, that are conservationists, that are naturalists, that somehow know how to use a camera, that have been involved in these eradications, being there and actually hearing these stories and the science firsthand, I think made experiencing it all that much better. It's like if you have that context and then you see it in person, I think wow was my most used word on the boat. So pretty epic, I've got to say, and like you say, firing up that passion, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's very different being there in person. Like to me, I quite often was overwhelmed in a very positive way. But just having all of the sensory input, so not just the visual, but actually the noise of the birds, right? The smell, sometimes not so pleasant smell of the guano of the birds. You can't mimic that with a documentary. You can't mimic the excitement of the people around you, which hypes you up yourself up even more to what's happening. And I just I still process sometimes what happened while we were especially on Campbell and Auckland Island, because there's just so much going on that a documentary just couldn't capture in the first place. Yeah, there's so many mini stories going on. For example, on the Sea Lion Beach, there's a mother giving birth. There's a beachmaster defending his harem against, a competitor, and a camera can't really capture what I guess your vision can. And yeah, it was just. I think I also cried a few times because it was that amazing. It's
Yeah, adding to that, one of the things that you can't really put in a documentary is when a sea lion that's a few meters long and it's got like a head the size of my torso, neck the size of my torso, comes and starts running and barking at you. Yeah, it's actually pretty scary. And then they said to us, don't worry, put your bag out or your hiking pole out. It'll give it a sniff and then it'll kind of back off. And then
it's just like a big puppy.
And then when it started snapping at Bradley's bag, one of the guys there, I gotta say my heart was racing. So yeah, you can't really compare that. Whether that's a good thing or not is another question. But yeah, they're huge.
No, thank you for that question, Jen. That brought memories back even just now.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions for Anna and Callum? Perhaps people are ready to retire to a cup of tea.
Fair enough. Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys. I especially liked Genevieve's question and your answer to it, because I think it's about immersing yourself in that place. And wouldn't it be nice if we could have a lot more people in New Zealand even experience some of our pest-free places even closer, and we might be generating a whole lot more involvement and funding towards these places. But I found it incredibly inspirational tonight. I'll be jumping on heritage expeditions and going for a little look-see. Yeah, thank you very much for your time and sharing your presentation tonight.
Another question.
Thank you. I think David might have another question.
He's got some claps there, I think. Is that right?
Thank you.
Just one note. Thanks, Jen. You were like an awesome guide. Thumbs up to that. Yeah. It was really, really cool. It's kind of hard to tell with the screen without the camera, but yeah, I just want to say thanks, Jen, without context.
No, thank you. It really makes my job a delight having people that are as excited to be there as we are, and just like seeing the enthusiasm and the energy you guys put on has, really, really had an impact on me too. So thank you.
No, thank you. I'll come back down and chant your ear off again anytime.
Yeah, maybe as a workmate.
Well, thank you everyone for coming along tonight. We do have Callum's expertise for our next webinar, which will be the last Thursday of July. And he's going to be giving us some advice on communications. So we look forward to seeing Callum and maybe Anna then again. And hopefully some of you can make it along to that one as well. So have a good night. Everyone enjoy Matariki and your long weekend.
Yeah. No, thanks again, Emma and BCA, and take care. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.